Hey guys. Okay. They want me to move around a little bit. All right, so I am a producer. I had a long career in LA, over 30 years, lots of different kinds of shows. I was actually overseeing all the post-production at a particular production company when I got the opportunity to produce a few of the Modern Marvels series. So Modern Marvels was the kind of the core series for History Channel. They made it for 10 plus years. They're still running them. There's probably 650 episodes. So the company I was working for, we were the hired gun. We were the supplier. So they said, you guys come up with a bunch of ideas, and so we were it. We were the Modern Marvels production company. So first I did the post-production, so that meant I was QCing and overseeing editorial, field work, sound, graphics. So everything you're gonna see here has to be exactly right every single time. So if a show goes on the air and there's a glitch in it, or your face is on it and you're not supposed to be on it because you didn't sign a release, it's on me. So that's what post-production is all about, okay? So I'm just gonna ask a couple questions, like how many students have access to a media department at school? You guys do, huh? You guys, and what school are you guys from? It's my classroom. Your classroom? Okay, good. A different school, Andrew? For you guys? Say it again? Okay, cool. And so we have a mixture of like elementary right through high school, right? And how about parents? How many parents? Cool. Teachers? Okay, let's give our teachers a round of applause. We don't get anywhere, right? We don't get anywhere without our teachers. I've been working in Elk Grove Unified actually for the past few years, creating what I call story-driven training content. So like now I'm working on a bully prevention video for the elementary level. And then when I do one for secondary level, I'll do a slightly different storyline. Other shows I worked on was, I did about 6 or 7 years on kids shows. Did anybody ever see Beetleborgs? No. Yeah? You heard of it? Beetleborgs? It was right after Power Rangers. That's an amazing story. I don't think we have time to tell those stories, but Beetleborgs and Mystic Knights and those shows were what we call strip shows, every day, daily shows. So we had to deliver a show every single day. And sometimes we would deliver them the night before, every now and then the morning of, but that's how tight the schedules are. So I'm wondering, do you guys have an idea of an area that you're interested, just in general? Just raise your hand if you think, oh, I'm thinking about editing, I'm thinking about writing, I'm thinking about acting. Anybody? So, good. Okay, so good, about half, you have some sort of idea. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the roles of, would that be good? Like producer, associate producer, field director? Would that be good? Okay, so the term producer is a little bit confusing, but it really does mean different things for each genre. So a producer in feature films could simply be the money person. And now when you look at a series like The Big Bang or something, I think that's a 3-camera studio show. There's 1 million producers because now they give away producer credits to the writers and to the post supervisors and all that. So it's a little bit tricky. It used to mean the person who runs the show. And that is what it means in Modern Marvels and most of the docu-style stuff you see on the network. You know what I mean? Like crime shows and all that. So the producer is the showrunner. So you are in charge of the story, you're in charge of hiring the writers, you're in charge of hiring the associate producer, and you're in charge of setting everything up so that it happens smoothly in the field. And then you're also, in this case, you sit with the editor and you edit with them. So you're on it from the beginning right through the end. Sometimes on other shows, like I did a show for Discovery called Your Kid Ate What? That was the name of the show. You know, kids, the thing they eat most is pennies. It was always a happy ending, but they ate weird things, you know. That was the name of the show. Your kid ate what? So on that show and shows like that, I would just go out in the field. I would be the field producer. I went out, I conducted interviews, I went home, that was it. Okay, so I'm gonna play a clip, and just gonna talk you through clip by clip and then talk about different jobs.
They're the toughest ships in the water, plowing headlong into one of nature's hardest obstacles. A killer combination of mammoth horsepower, surgical precision, and the strongest hulls on the open sea. Now, Icebreakers on Modern Marvels. Ice, one of nature's most formidable barriers.
Boom. Okay, so that was the teaser. So that's a 30-second opening. That's the teaser to get you into Act 1. So most of these shows are a six-act structure, and the teaser really's got to pop. Anybody interested in that show? Okay, that is a good one. Okay, let me just check my notes here. So the QC aspect of that, like just the opening title itself, that could take 2 weeks to make that, to design it, the graphics, and then the sound effects, going in over and over and over and over. What kind of sound do we like? Do we like, or it would be hours of that? Okay. So the writing is, how it happens with Modern Marvels is, I would be assigned an idea, like say they want to do a show about icebreakers. So, and then I would go and do research with myself and the associate producer. So again, the associate producer can mean different things, but generally speaking, it means a really top-notch researcher. And somebody who can help you with logistics, help you with getting releases signed, and help you set up locations. So, like on this show, I had to go way up to the tip of Minnesota, because they were actually, what we found out in doing our research was, we found out they were building a new icebreaker. So we worked that into the show, right? We didn't know it, but first I thought I'm gonna have to go on an icebreaker, and then when I called the Coast Guard and they said, you know, yeah, you could probably get on, but we're not sure when you can get off. I thought, meh, I don't think I'll do that. I think I'll go into the warehouse where they're building it, which was really cool. You'll see a clip about that later on. Okay, so the writing is you do an outline, the network approves it, and then you decide with your executive producer, who are you going to interview, right? So with each subject, like I did this show about the Transcontinental Railroad, I really wanted this guy who had written a book called The Empress Empire, and it was a really cool book about the Transcontinental Railroad. Usually we wouldn't have access to people like big authors and stuff, because it's kind of a low budget show in History Channel world. They made those our shows for about $175,000 per episode, and that was even a little bit low cost because a lot of the costs got absorbed within the infrastructure of the company. So the way you guys use your media department, you work as a team, right? And you pool your resources. So you double up sometimes on camera or audio and like that. Yeah, so. Okay, let me go down here to another clip and I'll.
In mid-19th century America, the fastest trains chugged along at just 25 miles per hour. And no rail line ventured further west than the town of St. Joseph on the Kansas-Missouri border. But despite the railroad's limitations, men of vision and men of greed viewed it as the wonder that could unify and transform the far-flung nation. They envisioned an American continent linked from coast to coast by a road of iron, an avenue to economic glory and boundless opportunity. Engineering such a dream, however, seemed impossible. Between the established East and the new territories of the West sprawled nearly 2,000 miles of virgin wilderness and hostile terrain.
If you try to picture what North America was like in the 1840s and 50s, when the whole notion of the railroad began, you're basically talking about a vast emptiness beyond first the Mississippi and then the Missouri River. And beyond that, empty plains, a few scattered villages, several mountain ranges such as the Rockies and the Wasatch and the Sierra Nevadas. And basically that was the whole area that had to be crossed.
So that, I want to talk about writing, the writing part of it, and the editing part of it, and partly the associate producer part. So you notice there wasn't a lot of live stuff that I shot. Most of that was archival, right? So we really have to utilize, and that's what a good associate producer understands the story and can get in there and help me when I do my outline and when I start writing. Oh, I need a really expansive helicopter shot of Donner Pass. I need really cool shots of the West so I can try to get a mood going. So, so that sequence worked pretty well. And again, it's kind of an introduction. It's maybe not the strongest Act One because there's not a lot of pop in a way to it, but it's more of a story-driven Act One. And that guy, David, I thought was really important to have. Missed him twice. Once a snowstorm and then another thing, and then finally I got him. So what you also saw was integrating the interviews with the narration. So you're hearing the voice right behind the curtain. I'm not a huge fan of the narration, especially in a show like this, because I feel like if I'm going to interview an engineer and an author and a historian, I feel like I want to hear the story from them. And so that comes down to making sure you really know your material before you go out in the field. So the associate producer, in some cases, will do these pre-interviews. So you might sit down with me and we'd come up with questions. And in my case, I always do the pre-interviews myself because I feel like I'm going to be the one asking the questions. I'm going to be in the field, and I don't want to be in the field with a guy who built a bridge and I don't know anything about it. But a lot of guys, and women, but mostly guys, would go out into the field, with just their questions. So you do want to have questions, but when you're conducting an interview, you always need to know your subject, and you always need to be able to think on your feet and play off of what they're giving you. So if you know your story well already, then you can think beyond the 10 or 20 questions that you brought with you. That's a huge thing in conducting an interview. A lot of people just go out and ask their 10 questions. Oh, okay, got an answer, go to the next one. You don't want to be nervous out there because you need your interview subject to be comfortable. And that's what you do. So you get to the field location early and you make that person feel comfortable. 90% of the time, people are pretty okay with it. Even a lot of the teachers, sometimes I'll interview teachers here and they're like, ooh, I don't want to. But once we talk a little bit and they start talking about what they love to do, then it's all cool and it's authentic. And that's what you need. You need authentic. You don't want recited, just say my question back to me. You don't want that because that's not going to play well up there, right? Okay. So again, I guess the thing to think of when you're thinking about something like that, or when you're out in the field when we see these next clips, is you are constantly thinking about what your story is. You're constantly hearing, you almost want to put in your mind what David Bain said in his morning interview, what the guy on the bridge said the day before. Look at your next questions, because you're kind of writing it as you're shooting it. And in a way, you're kind of editing it as you're shooting it. So I'm going to play another clip, and then we'll talk about the shooting in the field.
The Glib's crew readied itself for the demanding high-stress job of icebreaking. Its builders took on the monumental task of wheeling her out of the construction hangar.
The entire vessel was built inside a building, modularly designed, brought together and assembled, which is really quite impressive. But probably even more impressive is when you actually watch the vessel be put onto 1,000 Caterpillar feet and walked out of the building over a couple-day period of time, over to the waves, where it's then lifted up and put on the waves for launching. That truly is amazing.
The new pride of the Coast Guard's fleet of icebreakers entered the water in April 2005 to begin 7 months of testing alongside the veteran Mackinac. When the Glib was officially commissioned in 2006, she took on her predecessor's name. The new Mackinac owes a debt to the pioneering icebreakers of centuries past, and to crews armed not with high tech, but only their guts and determination. Many gave their lives as they were swallowed up by the frozen sea.
Okay, so that's an act out transition. So that's an act out of Act 1 and a transition into Act 2. So you always want to have a punchy act out to keep people tuned in. And you want to have as smooth as you can of a transition. So I liked going from the cool new Mac getting dumped in the water to the old ships. Like when you're writing, you'll have these moments and you're like, oh yes, that's genius. You know, and you may have to write it several times. When you're writing, no matter what you're writing, it's not my strongest skill set, so it's a little bit torturous for me, but from talking about to many other writers, when you're writing, you just need to keep writing. Don't cross out sentence, cross out, go away, cross out, go away. Just keep writing, and eventually it'll get there. So just outline it, just write about one character or write one act. Just keep writing. It's kind of like when you're on the set, when you have time and you're shooting a sequence, say like these ships going into the water, keep shooting. You know, you've got 6 hours, you've got to do 4 interviews, you've got to pick up all the B-roll. Do you guys know what B-roll is? Okay, so you've got to get all your cutaways, and the rule of B-roll is you can never have too much. Right? You guys know, if you've been in the editing room, and people who haven't been in the editing room, every time somebody's talking, a talking head, you have to cut into that interview many, many times. So you have to chop it up, what we call frankenbiting. So if you're looking at your script and you have all the interviews always get transcribed. So then you've got all your interviews and you go, okay, I've got to make a story out of this. So you start looking at your interviews and you start literally cutting and pasting the script. And then you go in and add the narration, because the narration is not your only tool to tell the story. The interview subjects are the people who you want to tell the story. The narration is the bridge that fills in and helps you link one interview to the next interview. It's kind of magical, because there's always, you think, oh my God, how am I going to connect these 2 interviews? They didn't sound. But somehow there's always a way. Again, if you're always thinking about the story and you're always really aware of what people are saying, you'll start to instinctually ask the right questions, and you'll get bites and clips from people where they will align with other interview subjects. Another way to do that, and how you protect yourself, is if I'm interviewing you 4, and you 4 know something about this subject, I'm going to ask you all different questions, but I'm also going to pick 3 or 4 questions that I'm going to ask everybody the same question. Because you're going to say it one way, you're going to say it another way, and you are going to nail it. So you protected yourself, right? Because the less good stuff there is when you get back from the field, the harder it's going to be to edit and the harder it's going to be to write. Everything becomes harder, because that's the gold out there, is the B-roll and the interview subjects. And so there you also saw the archival footage. Again, you can imagine it takes time to track down these certain kinds of ships in this certain year of history, right? Okay. Let me see. And the interview guy, the Coast Guard guy, again, you always have to be thinking about, we were given 10 days to shoot, right? So I know I have 10 days. I know I have a budget for 10 days, but what am I going to do with that budget? So if I have to call the Coast Guard, which isn't easy, that's not like picking up the phone and calling the local CBS station, hey, do you guys have somebody I can interview? No. The Coast Guard, you got to go through channels, and it's a little tricky if they're going to say yes or not. So the associate producer knows how to do that stuff. And it's a cool job. I've been the associate producer. That's cool because you're the one who's kind of making it happen from the get-go. So that guy, it was about 40 below, I'm not kidding. But I thought, well, I got to do this interview outside because it's about icebreakers, right? So that takes a little longer because it's cold and we have gloves and hats and then we got audio gear and we got a camera gear and where's the snow and where's it going to go? So all that stuff has to be taken into consideration when you're planning for your shoot. Okay. Anybody have any questions? If you do, just raise your hand. We can, go ahead.
What's the hardest part about filming in post-production?
About filming in post-production? Or post. Yeah. Which one is harder? I'd say filming is more challenging. They're different. Filming is more challenging because, man, it is all on you, right then and there. It's on you. You represent the production company. You represent the network. And if your people who you decided to interview don't show up, or they forgot to sign their release, or somebody comes down to the dock and says, hey, you guys can't shoot here, you have to deal with that. In post-production, there's a joke where people say, we'll just fix it in post. And that's kind of true, because you can fix a lot of things in post. But there's pressure on you, but at least you're in an office, and the pressure isn't instant, you know? So that's what I'd say would be the difference. Okay.
The majestic towers of the Bay Bridge endure as an elegant and indelible feature of the San Francisco skyline. They rise 519 feet above the bay, and each weighs a staggering 5,000 tons. For some 70 years, a key part of the tower's structural integrity has been a network of reinforcing bars secured with rivets, a system called lacing.
Today's high-strength steel is much different. We know how it handles and the kind of shear capacity that it has. And with the testing we have today, we know a designer will know how a bolt will handle a particular seismic or stress on it. So that's why replacing them is so important, because of the brittleness and the type of construction of the rivets of old.
Everybody been on the Oakland Bay Bridge? A few times? Yeah. Well, it took a lot longer than they planned, you probably know. But it was a cool shoot to do. So you see, in that case, we were shooting on a boat. So what would you have done if you showed up to shoot that day and you had like 4 interviews set up on a boat and it was raining? What would you have done? Keep shooting? Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, Andrew? Do it in the rain? Yeah. Good idea. Right, go under the boat, yeah. All possibilities. I think, so that's the thing. You got to be ready to make one of those decisions and then commit to it. Umbrella in the shot, I guess if we had to, but not ideal. Go under the boat, probably wouldn't be enough room, but maybe. But that's something you would check out. And maybe there's a place where we can get under the bridge and be somewhat covered and still be in the elements. You know, that's what I would have, I guess, tried for. Go ahead. Sorry, I can't hear you. Say, never show them what part you want? Yeah, come on up. I can hear you.
Never show, like, don't show, like, the shot, then show the shots of something else.
Uh-huh. Okay, good. That's good. In a pinch, that could work, except you want to always identify who's talking at least once so that it's not just some random person. But once you identify the person, that's a good trick of editing. Once you've seen the face of that guy, you can use his voice again and again and cut back to him just really quickly. So if you don't have really good shots, and if somebody is uncomfortable in the interview, I did have one guy, he was at Volvo Trucks, it was a truck thing. He had been on a show before, but he was so nervous. I've never had it happen, but I couldn't get him. He couldn't do it. He kept, flubbing and stopping, and I just felt so bad for him. He was so nervous. I thought, okay, we're good. We tried. So I moved on. I picked another guy who was going to show me the new inside of the truck, and I asked him those questions. And luckily, he was able to answer most of them, and the rest of it I had to fill in with voiceover. So next thing is a cool, again, using a lot of archival footage, but really relying on the editor to put together a sequence with, again, just like whatever footage we can get. You'll see, you'll be like, where did they get that? Think of these caissons in the water from 1900. Okay.
His foundations was as true as they come. He was a grizzled daredevil, a diver named Bill Reed. Reed's challenging job was to drop down inside and around the caissons to make sure they hit bedrock cleanly. It was on his word that concrete was poured to seal the piers. Reed's assignment was as dangerous as it was demanding. His diving suit and equipment weighed a crushing 370 pounds. The water pressure at the bottom of the bay was so intense that he could barely speak via radio to his contacts at the surface. To top it off, the visibility in the muddy waters of the bay was zero.
He had to go down there, and he couldn't see. They didn't have the underwater lamps and things like you have today, and he had to literally feel his way around.
Okay, so I just wanted to show you that because it was cool. Like, imagine that guy had to go under there with all that heavy, heavy gear on. So the editor and the producer work really closely together. I like to give, as an editor, you want to be more than somebody who's pushing the buttons and cutting this together and cutting that together. You need to be more than that. You need to be thinking kind of like a producer. In fact, there's a whole new job description now called Predator, a person who can edit and produce at the same time. Also, sometimes in the world we live in now with so much content, they want you to be able to shoot, edit, and be the person conducting the interview while you're shooting. And that's not easy. A lot of people are doing it, but they're not doing it well. And that's because it's really hard, right? Because if you've got the camera, I've tried it a few times and I've no, it's not worth it. I'm not getting good content. You need to make that interview subject feel comfortable, especially if it's a touchy subject. And the camera person needs to be totally focused on the camera. You can't forget to turn the audio on. And so when you're working, that brings me to a thought, just in LA, if it's LA, there's lots of careers to be had here. There's agency work, there's, all kinds of corporate content out there, digital content out there. But in Los Angeles or New York, you gotta be on it. And that means every step. So if you go out on one shoot and you have a problem and you didn't get the interview, you're not going back out. Not for that company. So there is it's the pressure. So you wanna know your stuff. And when you're working for people in a production company, you want to always have a really good attitude, really polished, really professional, no drama. Be kind to yourself, always. But, you really have to pay attention and anticipate. So if you guys are out on a shoot with me and we have this issue where I want to get 2 cameras up on that bridge. You got to be ready to help me. Anticipate the fact that you just heard me say it to the guy I'm going to interview. I want to get 2 cameras up on that bridge. You want to be listening and be ready to help me if you're the production assistant on that day. Okay? Okay. Okay, so this is the engineer who built the Oakland Bay Bridge, the restored. And anyway, here I'll play.
Engineer can do is know history well. What went wrong, what did not. There are a lot of lessons to be learned.
Applying the lessons of the past, the designers of the new Bay Bridge have conceived a structure they hope will set a new standard for seismic resistance.
The Bay Bridge is a lifeline structure, which means that it has a no collapse criteria and has to be back in service within hours after a major event.
A key innovation designed to help meet this no collapse criteria is an integral part of the East Span Skyway. The Skyway sections are linked by a system of hinge beam expansion joints that use steel pipes placed in the deck segments. The system enables the bridge to sway and slide during a quake and keep the bridge segments aligned.
And what we see right here is one of those joint locations. The 2 openings are where we install the hinge pipe beams.
The only way to get a good look at one of the 60-foot-long hinged pipe beams is to venture inside the belly of the bridge.
We are inside the Skyway Bridge between 2 sections or 2 frames of the structure itself. You can see there's an actual gap between the bridge sections. In the seismic event, the hinge pipe beam will actually take some of the force and keep the 2 frames of the bridge aligned with one another.
During an earthquake, this allows the bridge to flex as much as 3 feet, so it can absorb seismic forces that might destroy a conventional span.
If the forces get so large that a pipe beam sees too big a stress, then the fused portion, which is the middle piece of the hinge pipe beam, will actually deform. That can then be replaced following an earthquake.
A couple of things. So you've seen how we're using animation to help tell the story, right? Yes?
How much do you storyboard? Do you storyboard before you go out and film or after?
Yeah, it's a good question. Storyboarding on this, not so much, except for once you've shot everything and you're going to decide. So in this case, I think we had to have 5 animations per show. So then you might storyboard, or as the producer, like me, I don't draw exactly, but I might give a little outline of what I want it to look like. And then, so the animator will draw storyboards because it's expensive to do those animations. And so we hired usually freelancers and we say, yeah, so we need to show this, and we give them the script. Here's what we're describing. And sometimes we might change the language of the narration to fit the animation. So in that sense, we would storyboard, and because you don't want to go at that 3 or 4 times, because you only have a couple $1,000s to do your animations, and you can't go over budget. Yeah. So the other thing about that I'm going to talk about is that, so the cameraman, okay, so usually sometimes it's women. There's more and more women camera people out there. A lot of times on these, what we would do is pick up a local person, pick up a local crew. So I wanted to go in what they call the belly of the bridge. So again, I had to really be thinking about time. So we went up there, and you see that he's inside where all those big holes were. We're inside there. You could see the water. You could see the cars across going on the other side of the working bridge. So you have to have a camera person who's willing to think with you and help you. I like it if they're creative and they can help me come up with good ideas. Otherwise, it's just me out there. I did a show in 1,800 feet below Lake Erie, the salt mines. It's crazy. I mean, it's huge down there, football field after football field of salt mines. And I just had this guy, and he just was like a robot, you know? He just wasn't helping me at all. So it really made it tough for me. Plus, I was already underground and running around downstairs. So if you want to go into camera work, again, every single job requires the really level of professionalism and communication skills. And if you guys are with me later, I'll talk more about that, about being on the set and all that. But every level of a job in the industry, no matter what it is, radio, local radio, whatever it is, it requires you to be on top of your game and very communicative. Okay, last one, and then I'll ask you guys if you have any questions.
One more drama remained. The moment the two rail lines were joined. A special ceremony was planned in which trains from each company would meet at the spot.
May 10th, 1869 was a beautiful, bright, sunny morning. The Union Pacific was coming from the east. The locomotive, the number 119, was pulling Thomas Durant and his entourage right here to the last spike site.
And Stanford and his party were coming from the west, being pulled by a Jupiter. And they met here.
The ceremony called for Stanford and Durant to drive not one, but 4 spikes. 2 gold, 1 silver, and a 4th made of gold, silver, and iron. A telegraph operator stood by to signal the news. 6 years after the first track had been laid, the dream of a nation united by rail was realized.
The Transcontinental Railroad connected the two halves of the country. Without the railroad, it would have been 2 separate countries.
Before the Transcontinental Railroad was built, it literally took 4 months to go from Omaha to the West Coast by wagon. And once the train was built, you could get a first-class ticket and be in San Francisco from Omaha in 4 to 5 days.
The most amazing thing about the Transcontinental Railroad is the people that envisioned it, the people that built it, the people that financed it. The people that did this are phenomenal. It's a work of giants, truly a work of giants.
Okay. So that was tricky because, again, I had to use archival footage and try to make it kind of exciting. I shot some of the stuff action. Like, again, it was unusual for us to be on a location where I could actually ask them to put a train behind my interview guy. So that was risky, but I was willing to take the risk to, because I didn't have time to do it 10 times. I had time to do it once. So when you're setting up an interview, like those interviews all looked pretty cool. One had the railroad tracks behind it, one had the train actually coming behind it. The other guy was actually standing on Promontory Point in Utah where the spikes really did get driven in. And, so he's pointing. So I thought, oh, okay. When I'm out there, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll have him point. I don't know what footage I have that he's going to be pointing to, but I'm hoping I can get some. So you could shoot it 2 ways. You can have him do it like this and point, and then have him do it straight to camera. So you have options when you get into the editing room. Okay. So all TV is different, right? All the genres are different. What do you guys like to watch? Do you guys watch? Tell me some shows you like. Grey's Anatomy. Sports Center? Okay. HG. Oh, yeah, HG, yeah. Say it again. Oh, yeah, that's cool. I almost started watching season 2, and then I thought, no, Lauren, don't, because then you won't go to sleep, and I have to get up. Okay, cool. HGTV, I know a good friend of mine who works there, and they are, this production company in the HGTV story, they are the people who supply almost like so much of their content. Yeah, the stock footage, there's a lot of stock footage houses out there, and now with the internet, it's way easier to find stuff. So you can go on websites like Big Stock or the Getty has a great library. So there's these gigantic, massive libraries of this kind of stuff. So you can really search something really specifically, or you can call the people at the stock library and say, I need this. And they'll send you a whole reel of stuff that you can look through and pick. And then you have to figure out if you can afford it, because you have to pay a license fee for the stock footage. So it just depends on what your budget is, what you can afford. Thank you, guys.
Another big round of applause for Ms. Levine. Thank you so much.